Long before the age of great stone temples, before the royal names carved into walls, before Egypt became the Egypt history remembers, there lived an older world along the Nile. It was a world of reeds, mud, stars, floodwater, and silence. Villages rose and disappeared. The river gave life, then took it back. The sky was not yet divided into theology and astronomy. The earth was not yet ruled by dynasties. And yet, from that deep and almost unreachable distance, one name begins to appear like a shape standing inside the mist. Thoth. He does not enter history with the force of a conqueror. He does not arrive like a storm god, demanding fear. He comes differently. He appears as a presence of order in a world still learning how to remember itself. In the oldest spiritual imagination of Egypt, that mattered more than power. Because before civilization can rule, it must first name. It must count the seasons, mark the floods, track the stars, preserve the dead, and carry memory farther than a single human life. A kingdom is not born only from armies or walls. It is born from a victory of memory over forgetting. And in that sacred struggle, Thoth begins to take form. To later generations, he would be shown with the head of an ibis, sometimes as a baboon, sometimes standing calmly beside the gods as if he had always been there, as if he belonged not to one moment in time, but to time itself. But that later image can make us forget how strange his role truly was. Thoth was never simply a local deity of one narrow function. Even in the earliest currents of Egyptian thought, he feels older than categories. He is not just a god among gods. He is the intelligence that makes divine order visible. He is the witness who records. He is the one who knows what happened before others speak of it. He is memory given sacred form. That is why his hidden history cannot be understood only by looking at statues or temple carvings from the mature age of Egypt. To understand why Thoth mattered, we have to go back to a time when the first architecture of civilization was not made of stone, but of meaning. Before monuments were raised, people had to believe the world could be read. The river had rhythms. The heavens had signals. Death was not random. Kingship was not chaos. The world, for all its danger, could be brought into pattern. This was one of the greatest spiritual revolutions in human history, and Thoth stands near its center. He belongs to that mysterious threshold where observation becomes wisdom. A flood returns. A star rises again. A ritual is spoken the same way a second time, then a third, then for generations. Slowly, pattern becomes law. Law becomes sacred. Sacred order becomes civilization. In that long awakening, Thoth is remembered as the being who does not merely know the pattern, but preserves it. He is the guardian of continuity. He holds together what would otherwise scatter. And this is what makes him so different from the gods of simple passion or force. Many deities embody the visible powers of nature. The sun blazing overhead, the desert's violence, the fertility of the river, the terror of death. Thoth, by contrast, embodies something less visible but even more important for a lasting culture. The mind that can hold reality together. He represents the discipline behind permanence. He is the quiet authority behind the spoken spell, the measured ritual, the remembered lineage, the hidden principle that says the universe is not only alive, but intelligible. In that sense, Thoth belongs to the dawn of civilization in a way that feels almost philosophical. He is not merely worshipped. He is needed. Without a figure like Thoth, there's no sacred memory, no trust that truth can be preserved, no bridge between one age and the next. He becomes the invisible spine of a culture built on continuity. Egypt did not see itself as inventing order from nothing. It saw itself as aligning with a deeper order already woven into the cosmos. Thoth was one of the great signs that such order existed. This is why his story feels hidden even when his name survives. He was never meant to be the loudest figure in the room. He stands behind the throne, beside the ritual, behind the language of priests and kings. He is present wherever chaos is measured and transformed. He belongs to the moment humanity first sensed that wisdom was not just useful, but holy. And that is where the mystery deepens. Because once a civilization begins to believe that memory itself is divine, then forgetting becomes more than loss. It becomes danger. The collapse of memory means the collapse of order. The loss of sacred knowledge means the world can fall back into confusion. So from the earliest horizon of Egypt, Thoth carries another meaning as well. Not only the keeper of what is known, but the protector of knowledge against time. That may be the oldest secret hidden inside his name. Thoth is not remembered because he ruled the first age. He is remembered because he preserved it. He stands at the edge of history like a guardian of beginnings, holding the fragile thread between what humanity first learned and what later ages would struggle not to lose. If Thoth first stands before us as the guardian of memory, then the next step in his mystery is even more astonishing. Memory alone is not enough to build a world. What is remembered must be shaped, measured, spoken, and set into order. And this is where Thoth becomes something far greater than a silent keeper of the past. He becomes the one who gives structure to reality itself. In Egyptian thought, order was never just a human invention. It was cosmic. The stars moved with purpose. The moon waxed and faded according to a hidden law. The seasons returned. The Nile rose and fell. Ritual words had power because they echoed patterns already written into existence. To live, well, was not simply to survive. It was to align oneself with that living order. And standing at the center of that sacred arrangement was Thoth, the divine scribe, the measurer, the master of the word that does not break. This role matters more than it may seem at first. In modern thinking, writing often feels ordinary, almost mechanical. We write to store information, to send messages, to preserve ideas. But in the ancient world, writing was close to miracle. A spoken word vanished into the air. A written word remained. It crossed generations. It resisted death. It could carry commands, prayers, laws, names, and rituals beyond the limits of one single breath. In a civilization obsessed with permanence, that made writing more than a tool. It made it sacred. And so the god most closely linked to writing became more than a patron of scribes. He became the guardian of continuity between thought and eternity. Thoth is the one who records the names of kings, the deeds of souls, the rhythms of the heavens. But this is not only record-keeping in a narrow sense. His writing is part of the cosmic fabric. To name something is to place it within order. To measure it is to reveal its relation to the whole. To inscribe it is to protect it from the erosion of time. Under the shadow of Thoth, language becomes architecture. A temple wall, a funerary text, a royal decree, even a sacred calendar. All of these are extensions of the same profound idea, that truth can be fixed into form. And then there is the moon. This is one of the most beautiful parts of his identity, and one of the most revealing. While other gods blazed like the sun or shook the earth with force, Thoth belonged to a gentler but no less powerful light. The moon does not overwhelm. It measures. It reflects. It marks passage. It teaches rhythm. Month after month, its changing face offered ancient people a visible map of time itself. To link Thoth with the moon was to link him with recurring order, with a subtle intelligence hidden inside cycles. He is not the explosion of divine power. He is the mind that can track it. This lunar quality gives Thoth a special kind of authority. He watches the night, counts the intervals, and binds change in a pattern. In that sense, he becomes an architect of time, not because he created time in some abstract philosophical way, but because he makes time readable. He turns the passing of days into calendars, ceremonies, and sacred intervals. He allows life to move with the heavens instead of against them. And in a world where cosmic disorder was always a threat, this ability was more than useful. It was civilizational. That is why Thoth was so deeply connected with calculation, measure, and sacred proportion. He is present wherever number becomes meaning. He belongs to the invisible intelligence behind astronomy, ritual timing, temple design, legal order, and spiritual speech. He does not simply write words. He writes relationships. He reveals that nothing stands alone. Every event, every movement, every rite belongs to a greater pattern waiting to be understood. This is also why later traditions would look back on him with such fascination. A figure who joins language, mathematics, time, and cosmic law does not remain confined to one temple or one era. He begins to feel like the embodiment of a universal intuition, that the universe is not random, and that the disciplined mind can, in rare moments, read its design. That intuition begins here, in the ancient image of Thoth bending over the tablet, watching the sky, preserving the measure of things. And yet there is something almost haunting in this vision, because once knowledge becomes sacred measure, it is no longer merely information. It becomes responsibility, to know the right word, the right number, the right moment, the right ritual alignment. This is to stand near a dangerous kind of power, not the power of violence, but the power of precision. A world held together by order can also be wounded by error, neglect, or forgetting. So Thoth does not only bless wisdom, he disciplines it. He reminds us that truth is not a possession. It is a pattern one must learn to serve. That is why he remains so compelling even now. He represents a form of intelligence that feels both ancient and urgently needed. Careful, observant, patient, exact, and inwardly reverent. He teaches that the deepest knowledge is not noisy. It listens before it speaks. It measures before it acts. It understands that language can shape the soul just as surely as stone can shape a temple. So as the old world of Egypt rose in confidence and grandeur, Thoth stood quietly within its foundations. Every inscription, every ritual calendar, every act of sacred accounting carried some reflection of his presence. He was the scribe of heaven because heaven itself was thought to be intelligible. He was the architect of time because time itself was thought to carry meaning. And through him, the ancient mind dared to believe that the universe was not only vast and mysterious, but readable. But every civilization that learns to preserve order must also face a darker truth. Nothing built in time remains untouched by time. Temples crack. Dynasties collapse. Sacred centers are abandoned. Languages change. Priests die without naming all they knew. Fires, invasions, political struggles, shifting beliefs, and the long erosion of memory begin their work. And this is where the hidden history of Thoth becomes even more compelling, because he was not only associated with the creation of sacred knowledge, but with its survival after worlds had fallen apart. This matters because ancient Egypt did not live under the illusion that order, once established, would remain forever secure. Beneath its stability was always the threat of unraveling. The Nile could fail. The court could weaken. Foreign powers could rise. The old rites could be neglected. And if sacred knowledge was one of the pillars holding civilization together, then the loss of that knowledge was not merely cultural decline. It was a return of chaos. In that sense, every collapse was also a spiritual test. What would remain when the structures built to preserve truth were broken? The answer, according to the traditions that gathered around Thoth, was that true wisdom was never meant to live only in monuments. Stone could honor it. Temples could guard it. Scribes could transmit it. But none of these were the final container. The deeper teachings had to be able to pass through destruction. They had to survive in smaller forms, quieter forms, hidden forms. Not because they were weak, but because only what can be concealed can outlast catastrophe. That idea gives Thoth a new and almost secretive character. He is no longer only the calm recorder of cosmic order. He becomes the patron of continuity under threat. His wisdom starts to feel less like public doctrine and more like a current moving beneath history. The great temple inscriptions may proclaim divine law openly, But beneath that visible layer there emerges another possibility, that some knowledge was always reserved, protected, encoded, and given only in fragments to those prepared to receive it. This is one reason the figure of the priest-scribe becomes so important in the shadow of Thoth. In times of stability, the priest serves ritual order. In times of decline, the priest becomes a vessel. He carries formulas, correspondences, names, astronomical timings, symbolic meanings, and interpretations that may no longer be fully supported by the outer world. What was once held by an entire sacred system must now be held in memory, in teaching lineages, in copied texts, in careful transmission from one mind to another. When a civilization weakens, wisdom grows more inward, and this inward movement changes the feeling of the tradition itself. Knowledge that once belonged to temples now begins to take on the atmosphere of inheritance under pressure. Not everything can be said publicly. Not every teaching can remain intact. Some things are reduced to symbols. Some survive as liturgical fragments. Some are hidden inside myths. Some remain in ritual language long after the original explanation has faded. This is how sacred traditions often endure their own collapse, not by remaining fully visible, but by retreating into forms that can cross the broken bridge between ages. When we look at the long history of Egypt, we can feel this happening again and again. Political centers shift. Theological emphases change. Foreign rulers arrive. Older religious frameworks are reinterpreted. Some temples flourish, while others disappear into sand. Yet Thoth persists. That persistence itself is striking. It suggests that he represented something more adaptable than a local cult or a narrow religious role. He endured because he was tied to something every age still needed, the conviction that wisdom can be preserved even when power cannot. And perhaps that is why later imaginations surrounded him with stories of hidden books, lost chambers, secret inscriptions, and teachings buried for the future. Whether taken literally or symbolically, these stories reveal a deep intuition. People believed that not all sacred knowledge had vanished. Some of it had been withheld from destruction. Some of it had passed underground, almost like seed beneath winter soil. The image is powerful because it speaks to a fear that has haunted every age. What if the greatest truths disappear before humanity is wise enough to understand them? The answer offered through the legend of Thoth is astonishingly hopeful. They may disappear from sight, but not from being. They may go silent, but not die. This is where the phrase meant for future ages begins to carry real depth. It does not simply suggest prophecy in the dramatic sense. It suggests timing. It suggests that wisdom has seasons just as civilizations do. Some teachings cannot flourish in every age. Some are planted in one era and uncovered in another. In the world of Thoth, knowledge is not always lost by accident. Sometimes it is veiled by necessity. If a culture becomes unstable, superficial, or spiritually unprepared, then deeper truths may survive only through concealment. There's a psychological depth to this idea as well. Human beings often imagine wisdom as something that should always be easily available, clearly stated, permanently visible. But the older traditions were rarely so naive. They understood that truth without readiness can be ignored, distorted, or weaponized. To protect a teaching, one may need to hide it inside symbol, story, or ritual until a later mind can unfold it. In that sense, the hidden history of Thoth is not only about ruined temples. It is about the strange relationship between truth and human maturity. And so the image changes once more. We no longer see only the God beside the tablet, serenely recording the motions of heaven. We begin to sense a more enduring and more elusive presence, the guardian of transmission across collapse, the intelligence that knows how to survive when institutions fail. His temple may fall, but his principle remains. His statues may break, but his function continues. His language may pass through translation and reinterpretation, yet something essential is carried forward. That is the real grandeur of this stage in his story. Thoth becomes most powerful not when Egypt is strongest, but when Egypt begins to fracture. In times of splendor, wisdom is celebrated. In times of ruin, wisdom proves whether it is real. And according to the long imagination of the ancient world, what belonged to Thoth did survive. Not whole, not untouched, not always easy to recognize, but alive, passing through scribal hands, hidden texts, priestly memories, symbolic systems, and whispered inheritances, waiting for another age to ask again what had once been known. And then something remarkable happens. Thoth does not vanish when Egypt begins to lose its old central place in the world. He changes form. He crosses a boundary. He enters another language, another imagination, another civilization hungry for wisdom that feels older than itself. This is one of the most fascinating turns in his hidden history, because it shows that what Thoth represented was never limited to one culture alone. The form was Egyptian. The deeper idea was larger. As the worlds of Egypt and Greece came into contact, the old ibis-headed scribe began to be recognized through a new figure, Hermes. Not Hermes in the simple sense of a messenger god from familiar myth, but Hermes transformed, expanded, deepened. In this meeting of traditions, a new name emerged, one that would echo for centuries through mysticism, alchemy, philosophy, and esoteric thought. Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great. That title alone tells us something important. It is not the name of a local deity with one narrow domain. It is the name of a teacher standing at the crossroads of worlds. In Hermes Trismegistus, the memory of Thoth was no longer only the memory of temple ritual, sacred writing, and cosmic measure. It became the memory of primordial wisdom itself, the kind of wisdom believed to stand behind all true philosophy and all genuine spiritual awakening. Thoth had once helped order the outer world. Now, through Hermes, he began to illuminate the inner one. This is where the story grows even more profound. In ancient Egypt, the sacred order of the cosmos and the sacred order of the soul were never fully separate. But in the Hermetic tradition, that relationship becomes more explicit, more intimate, more psychological. The universe is still seen as living, layered, meaningful, and filled with divine intelligence. But now the human being is asked to discover that same order within. The stars are no longer only above. Their echo is in consciousness. The temple is no longer only built in stone. Its hidden chambers are in the mind. That shift changes everything. Wisdom is no longer just something preserved through priesthood, inscription, and rite. It becomes something awakened. The seeker is no longer merely a guardian of inherited forms. He becomes a participant in transformation. To study sacred truth is not only to learn. It is to be changed by what one learns. This is why the Hermetic image of Thoth Hermes carries such enduring power. He becomes the guide not only to cosmic law, but to initiation. And initiation, in its deepest sense, is not about gaining secret information for its own sake. It is about the reordering of the self. It is about becoming capable of seeing what was always present but never truly perceived. The ordinary mind is distracted, fragmented, pulled outward by fear, desire, and illusion. The initiated mind becomes clearer, quieter, more aligned. It begins to reflect the cosmos rather than merely react to it. This is where Thoth's old function as measurer and recorder takes on a new psychological dimension. He is now the intelligence that helps the soul distinguish what is permanent from what is passing, what is true from what merely dazzles. This is also the world in which alchemy begins to gather around his name. To modern ears, alchemy is often reduced to a strange attempt to turn base metals into gold. But that is only the outer image, and perhaps never the deepest one. In the symbolic universe shaped by Hermetic thought, Alchemy becomes the drama of transformation itself. Matter changes, yes, but so does the one who works with it. The furnace, the vessel, the dissolution, the purification, the union of opposites. These are not only operations on substances. They are images of the soul's own refinement. And suddenly Thoth, once the divine scribe of temples and stars, appears in a new role that somehow still feels completely true to his essence. He becomes the master of inner transmutation. He teaches that what is confused can be clarified, what is divided can be reconciled, what is heavy can be made subtle, what is unconscious can be brought into light. The old Egyptian concern with sacred order has not disappeared. It has gone inward. The chaos to be overcome is no longer only political or cosmic. It is psychological and spiritual. This is why so many later readers found Hermetic writings so compelling. They spoke in a voice that felt ancient, elevated, and strangely intimate at the same time. They suggested that the human being is not cut off from the divine, but clouded from it. They suggested that reality is layered with correspondences, that the visible world points beyond itself, and that the disciplined soul can ascend by understanding these hidden harmonies. Thoth Hermes becomes the archetype of the wise guide through this ascent. He does not force revelation. He prepares perception. There is something almost modern in this, though it is far older than modernity. Because beneath the language of spirit, stars, and sacred mind lies a truth that psychology itself would later rediscover in another form. Human beings do not suffer only from ignorance of facts. They suffer from fragmentation within. They can know many things and still remain inwardly asleep. Transformation requires more than information. It requires integration. The lower and the higher, the instinctive and the contemplative, the visible and the invisible, the mortal and the eternal. These must be brought into relationship. That is the real alchemical work. So the hidden history of Thoth enters a new chamber here, and the air changes. We are no longer only in the halls of ancient Egypt. We are in the meeting place of civilizations, where memory becomes philosophy, ritual becomes inward realization, and the god of sacred measure becomes the patron of self-knowledge. Through Hermes, Thoth survives not as a relic, but as a living current. He continues to whisper the same great secret in a different language, that the universe is ordered, that the soul can align with that order, and that the deepest temple a person may enter is the one concealed behind the surface of the mind. And once that idea takes root, history itself begins to look different. The ruins of temples matter less than the survival of the teaching. The loss of old forms matters less than the endurance of the path. What began on the banks of the Nile now speaks across centuries as an invitation, not merely to believe in hidden wisdom, but to undergo it. And this is where the deepest layer of the mystery opens, because once Thoth becomes more than a god of one civilization, more than a keeper of writing, more than a guide through the inner chambers of the mind, one final question begins to rise from beneath all the others. Why did so many traditions speak as if his knowledge had been preserved not merely from the past, but for the future? Why does the legend so often suggest intention, as though this wisdom was never meant to belong to every age in the same way? At first, this can sound like mythology in its most dramatic form, the old dream of hidden books, sealed chambers, lost tablets, messages buried beneath the ruins of time. But the power of the idea does not depend on whether every story is taken literally. Its deeper force lies in what it says about history, consciousness, and readiness. Again and again, the traditions surrounding Thoth imply that truth is not revealed all at once simply because it exists. It appears in proportion to what a civilization can bear, what a soul can understand, what an age is mature enough to receive without destroying the meaning of what it touches. That is an unsettling thought because it turns our usual picture of knowledge upside down. We like to imagine that if something is true, it should be obvious. If something is valuable, it should remain in full view. If wisdom matters, It should always dominate the world. But history offers very little comfort for that belief. Civilizations often preserve technique while losing meaning. They accumulate information while becoming spiritually confused. They become more capable outwardly and less inwardly ordered. Under those conditions, deeper knowledge may not disappear because it is weak. It may withdraw because it is strong enough to wait. And this is exactly why Thoth continued to matter to people living centuries after the old temples had faded. He came to represent a strange confidence in the endurance of wisdom. Not the confidence that everything sacred would remain visible, but the confidence that what is essential can pass through concealment and reappear when the conditions are right. In that sense, the future ages spoken of in legend are not just later points on a calendar. They are states of readiness. A future age begins whenever human beings recover the capacity to hear what an earlier age had already known. This gives the story an almost prophetic tone, but not prophecy in the narrow sense of predicting events. It is deeper than that. It is the prophecy of recurrence. The insight that humanity may repeatedly lose its center, repeatedly become fascinated by surfaces, repeatedly mistake noise for truth, and yet still be called back toward an older and more demanding wisdom. Thoth becomes the symbol of that return. He stands for the possibility that beneath collapse, distraction, and spiritual amnesia, there remains a pattern that can be remembered. And what is that pattern? At its heart, it is astonishingly simple, though never easy. The universe is not dead. Order is real. Consciousness matters. Language has power. Time has meaning. The human soul is not sealed off from the cosmos, but participates in it. To know truly is not only to collect facts, but to enter alignment. To speak rightly, measure rightly, think rightly, and live rightly is to take part in a structure older than any empire. This is the kind of knowledge that can be forgotten by advanced societies just as easily as by ancient ones. In fact, perhaps more easily, because sophistication can create the illusion that wisdom is no longer necessary. This is why the hidden history of Thoth still feels alive. He belongs to a part of the human story that never fully disappears. The intuition that civilization without inward order becomes dangerous, that intelligence without reverence becomes empty, and that memory without transformation becomes a museum of dead symbols. The knowledge meant for future ages is not valuable because it is secret. It is valuable because it asks something difficult of the one who receives it. It requires discipline. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to be changed. That may be the final reason his teachings were imagined as waiting across time. Not because truth enjoys hiding, but because human beings rarely approach it with the seriousness it deserves. We want revelation without preparation, power without purification, meaning without sacrifice. The traditions of Thoth push in the opposite direction. They suggest that sacred knowledge unfolds when the mind becomes capable of bearing it. The sealed chamber is not only buried under stone, it is buried under vanity, fear, restlessness, and illusion. The future age arrives when those walls begin to crack. So when later generations spoke of ancient books of Thoth, of forgotten inscriptions, of wisdom encoded for distant centuries, they may have been expressing something more profound than nostalgia for lost civilization. They may have been naming a permanent spiritual law. The highest knowledge is always ancient and always ahead of us. It is ancient because it belongs to the earliest order of things. It is ahead of us because we have not yet fully become what is required to live it. And perhaps that is why the figure of Thoth stands with such unusual calm across so much ruin. He does not appear frantic. He does not mourn like one who has truly lost everything. He watches. He records. He waits. His presence carries the strange serenity of a being aligned with longer cycles than human panic can understand. Kingdoms rise, preserve fragments of truth, distort them, lose them, rediscover them under new names, and still the pattern remains. Writing changes. Symbols change. Theologies change. The essential invitation does not. That invitation reaches into the present with more force than many people realize. Because our own age, for all its speed and brilliance, is haunted by fragmentation. We have more access to information than any generation before us, yet often less ability to distinguish what deserves devotion. We move faster through time, but understand time less. We speak more, but weigh words less carefully. We measure almost everything, yet struggle to measure what gives life meaning. In such a world, the old image of Thoth returns with astonishing relevance. Not as superstition, not as a relic, but as a reminder that true knowledge does not merely expand the mind. It orders the soul, and maybe that is the final secret hidden in his history. The wisdom meant for future ages was never meant only for some distant civilization after ours. It was meant for any moment in which human beings become exhausted by confusion and begin, once again, to hunger for what is real. It was meant for the age that finally understands that knowledge without depth cannot save us, that memory without sacred order cannot guide us, and that the greatest inheritance from the ancient world may not be its monuments, but its vision of a cosmos filled with meaning, measure, and mind. If that is true, then Thoth has never been waiting in the past. He has been waiting in the threshold between forgetfulness and remembrance, waiting in the silence before true understanding returns, waiting in the moment a culture begins to suspect that what it called progress may not be wisdom at all, waiting in the inner chamber where language becomes truth, time becomes pattern, and knowledge becomes a path back to alignment. And in that sense, the hidden history of Thoth is not only about what ancient people believed. It is about a question left for us. When the noise of an age begins to break apart, when inherited systems lose their power, when certainty becomes shallow and memory becomes fractured, what kind of knowledge is still worth carrying forward? The traditions of Thoth answer with extraordinary clarity. Carry forward what restores order between mind and cosmos. Carry forward what teaches the soul to see. Carry forward what survives ruin, because it belongs to something deeper than history. That is the knowledge meant for future ages. Not hidden because it was never true, but hidden because it was too true to be left exposed to every passing era. Waiting, always, for those willing to approach it not as collectors of mystery, but as servants of wisdom. And so the story closes where it began, beside the oldest waters, under the patient sky, in the presence of a figure who does not dominate the world by force, but outlasts it through understanding. The empires dim, the inscriptions weather, the names of kings fade into stone and dust. Yet still, behind the ruins, behind the symbols, behind the echoes of forgotten temples, there remains the quiet possibility that some truths were never lost at all. Only guarded, only veiled, only carried forward until the right age, or the right soul, was ready to remember. Thoth remains not as a relic of superstition, but as one of humanity's oldest images of sacred intelligence. He reminds us that wisdom is not measured by how loudly it declares itself, but by how deeply it can survive time, collapse, translation, and doubt. Across Egypt, across Hermetic thought, across the strange afterlife of esoteric tradition, his presence points toward the same mystery. That reality can be read, but only by a mind willing to become still enough, clear enough, and disciplined enough to read it well. What the ancients feared was not only ignorance. They feared disorder of the soul, because from that disorder came broken language, broken law, broken memory, and eventually broken civilizations. What they hoped for was not mere survival. They hoped for alignment with a deeper pattern, one in which thought, speech, spirit, and cosmos belonged together. Thoth became the emblem of that hope, and that may be why he still stands before us now, quiet and watchful, as if asking whether our own age has confused accumulation with understanding, whether we have mistaken data for wisdom, Whether we have forgotten that the highest knowledge does not flatter the ego, but reshapes it. His hidden history endures because it speaks to a permanent human condition. We are always in danger of losing what matters most, and always capable of remembering it again. Somewhere between the ruins of the past and the possibilities of the future, that remembrance waits. And perhaps it has been waiting for us.